Good morning. Thanks for letting me come and talk to you about Pinyon jays. I know it's a swing for the Gunnison Sage Grouse Summit. And like Pat said, I'm here to basically introduce you to where these birds are breeding and do we need to consider them when we're doing conifer removal to improve habitats for both Gunnison and greater sage grouse. And I want to preface this presentation that we're just starting to investigate Pinyon jays, and is it the slideshow? There we go. We're just starting to investigate Pinyon jays, so this is all very preliminary information, and it's going to be very descriptive. No stats hardly at all, so a lot of pictures. So why did we start looking at Pinyon jays? Well, they are a conservation concern, and as you can see in this graph, their population is declining pretty steeply, even steeper than that's what has been measured for the greater sage grouse. And we really don't know why this decline is happening, so we definitely need to start researching this species and seeing what the implications are for this decline. And just as a heads up, CPW just learned that there is an intent to submit a petition to list this species under the Endangered Species Act. So good timing for us to start looking at it. So just a little bit of background on Pinyon jays if you're not familiar with them. They're the nice corvid. We heard about the evil corvid yesterday. These guys are vegetarians. Don't bother anybody else. They are residents of the pinyon juniper woodlands. They aren't migrants. They do travel widely, however, because they're trying to access really unpredictable food resources. They're highly social and very vocal. They're amazing to watch. You've probably been walking in the pinyon juniper habitats, seeing a flock flying over, being very raucous, and if you ever take time to sit down and watch them, they're amazing. Right now, our flock sizes have been reduced in relation to that decline in populations. Probably now you're going to see a flock of about 40 to 50 to 60. Historically, they were much larger. We were pretty lucky that we did we're able to observe a flock of 800 birds in Montrose in 2020, and that's one of the highest numbered flocks that's been reported on eBird, so that was exciting. They do nest in colonies, so they stay in this flock and stay in this flock and go to a certain area and set up nests. And they do have cooperative breeders. It's usually a yearling of the year, usually a male that'll stick around and help the parents with raising the nestlings. They are uniquely, they have this mutualistic relationship with pinyon pines. Pinyon pine trees produce a great mass crop every once in a while, every 7 to 10 years. And usually it's the older trees that produce this mass crop. It takes a cone 3 years to ripen. And they ripen in the fall. So the pinyon jays in fall, that's when they start looking for these cone crops. And they have these really strong bills that can probe into the cones. They have naked nostrils so they don't get sap all over their face. And they're able to collect up to 50 plus seeds in their expandable esophagus, take these seeds and cache them for those times of years when these seeds aren't available. And they have amazing spatial memory that has been shown in experimental design studies. And I have to apologize that 2,600 should actually be 26,000 seeds that they can cache within a fall season. So if you're talking a flock of 70 birds that work together, you're talking close to 2 million seeds that they're caching in a season that then they can eat during the winter and the breeding season. They've been found to be able to retrieve up to 95% of those seeds that are cached, and those remaining seeds will germinate and regenerate the pinyon pine forest. So that's that mutualistic relationship. So because we knew the population was declining, we knew we had to start looking at the species. And the first thing that we did is thought, well, maybe we can find breeding birds and locate these colonies. At least we could identify areas where they're stable during the season, they're not making these long-range movements, and we can start to characterize these habitats. So in 2019, we started a grid survey. We ran point counts through that grid survey, would look for birds. If we saw breeding behaviors, we followed those birds and tried to pinpoint breeding colonies. And why did we want to assess colonies? Is one, we just want to understand how big these colonies are. I mean, are they a few acres? Are they 100 acres? How many birds nest in a colony? Because it's usually thrown around what actually a colony is defined as for a pinyon jay. Also, if they had high site fidelity, Then we could assess the habitat, and then we could understand where they're using these or where they're selecting to nest. And then we could also maybe protect them, since people are starting to do fuels reduction, treatments for big game, and for sage grouse. We could at least identify these areas and protect them in face of those treatments. And it may also give us information on why these populations are declining. And also, we wanted to develop a protocol and a monitoring program so we can inform other land agencies about what's going on with pinyon jays. So some of our findings, like I said, this is kind of descriptive work right now. We have been able to assess 23 colonies across the state in 2020 and 2021. We've mapped 281 active nests. An active nest is actually a female incubating. So she's active that year, and we've also been able to locate over 1,400 old nests. If you look at this bottom picture, we've been able to kind of classify nests. The one on the left is a very new couple-year-old nest. The one in the middle is probably getting to be 3, 5, 6-year-old nest. It's filling with debris. And the one on the right is a very dilapidated nest. So we can then use these nests to gauge how the extent of the colony and how old a colony is. We did find that the number of active nests for colonies varied from 1. You can have a single pair nesting in an area up to 29 pairs was the largest colony we found. We also found that most birds preferred to nest in or used juniper trees. These are just some quick pictures of what we found them nesting in. We have run some nest models. I'm not going to discuss those. We did not find any correlation between the nest tree and the bird's success at nesting. So they use a variety of trees. This one, let's see, how do you do this? This one on the left is just in a treatment area, and the bird nested in that tree, and she was actually fledged young from that tree. This is the most common tree. They're young, vigorous trees. Where the circles are, or where the nests are, there's a high twig density, so there's good cover for the nests, harder for predators to find. But just notice that some of these trees, there's not a lot of canopy cover around them. And then they also use very old trees to nest in. So when people ask me, tell me what kind of tree pinyon jays use to nest in, I don't know. It's all individual selection. So then we had collected all this nest information, so then we started to map colonies, and we were actually really surprised at the extent of some of these colonies in New Mexico. They've done some mapping similar to this, and their colonies are much smaller. We've had colonies from 37 acres all the way up to over 15,000 acres using old and new nests, so that's a pretty good footprint on the landscape that we need to maybe consider when we're doing these treatments. And if you just plot just active nests, those that had females incubating, colonies can still be as large as close to 500 acres. And the colonies have a huge variation on how close the birds nest to each other. They can nest as close as 4 meters to each other, so you can get these clumps of nest, and then they can spread out as far as 2.5 kilometers. And this is a colony in the bottom of the slide at Glade Park. And let's see, how do you do this pointer? So this is just a mapping of a nest, and it's pretty busy. The triangles are the classifications of nests, so they're each aged by different classifications. So in each area, you can see there's a multitude of age of nests. The red circles are nests that were active nests in 2020, and the purple squares are the ones that were active nests in 2021. So this colony was very active here in 2020, moved here in 2021, and I'm still assessing this colony, and they're back over here, no longer over here. So you also have to understand that these colony locations are very fluid. And interesting to note, I knew they were going to come back here because I caught them caching seeds at their cache sites in December. And this is more of a traditional looking colony. It's the same symbology, but you can see that the nests from both years where we've had activity and the old nest just overlap each other. So there's not, a colony isn't a colony isn't a colony. There's a lot of variation. Of course, wildlife always makes it difficult, doesn't it? As far as site fidelity, we did find high site fidelity. One, because we found a lot of old nests within these colonies. We did have confirmed breeding at 19 of the colonies of the 23 that we assessed. 3 of them, we only found breeding one of those years. And one, unfortunately, we went to go up to assess it, and a fuels treatment was being done, and all the nest trees were masticated. So We saw one bird in the area, couldn't find where they moved to. So this is just a map of where we've been looking at all our 23 colonies. You can see it's pretty spread across the state. The yellow squares are the ones that we've only found them nesting 1 year, though we have found old nests. And the one up in the northwest, this blue mountain, is the one where the mastication took place and kicked the jays out for a while. Not sure where they went. We did evaluate nest and fledgling success. We found 148 nests to evaluate nest success and 130 for fledgling success. And this was across 15 colonies. We didn't get enough information for all 23. Nest success I thought was, relatively good for passerine. Fledgling success, a little disconcerting to say the least, but we'll talk a little bit more about why that may have been so low. So I just wanted to show you some examples of the colonies that we encountered. So they definitely like to nest near open areas, sagebrush areas, grasslands, salt desert scrub. This is a colony, and they're nesting in these trees, but you can see it's all bordered by this open grassland shrubland. So this is another example. This is a colony that's surrounding this little open grassland. And as you move up this hill, we're not finding any jays that start to use this really thick canopy cover for breeding. I want to say for breeding. I don't know if they use that late summer, fall, winter. That may be where the mast trees are. So again, I'm just focusing on the breeding area. So this graphic you probably have seen a lot, being sage grouse gurus. And most of the time you want to remove trees in that phase 1, I think, for sage grouse is what I would say. And I would think if you didn't do it during the breeding season, which occurs from mid-February to late May for pinyon jays, they nest very early. I would say if you move some of these emergent trees, you probably wouldn't hurt them. They'll probably use them for a roosting site or a place to be vigilant for predators. But they really do like that co-dominance in phase 2 of the sagebrush and the pinyon juniper, and they move into the edge of phase 3. So I think just thinking about that as far as the breeding area for pinyon jays, you need to consider when you're thinking about treatments. So just some more examples. This is a colony that's near Delta, and so the pinyon jays nested along this stringer of pinyon juniper. And again, they're next to this open sagebrush habitat, and even the hillsides are open. They do like a lot of topography as well. I'm gonna go ahead and skip this slide because I think, am I doing okay time-wise? Okay, so this is just a schematic of that same colony. You can see they really like these drainage areas where there's some larger trees and a little bit thicker canopy cover. This is a treated area where that one little tree was, that nest was successful. So I think even just removing some of those emergent trees on top shouldn't be too harmful, again, as long as you don't do it when they're nesting in that area. These are just some more examples across the state. This is gypsum. So the pinyon jays were nesting in the trees around here and even some up in here. This is a nest tree. Again, notice not a lot of canopy around that nest tree. This is in Meeker. So again, the pinyon jays were kind of throughout this area in little clumps of trees. Again, this is a nest tree. I mean, to me, it kind of surprised me how open we were finding nests in. But they still also did nest in some thicker canopy cover as well. And this is in the San Luis Valley. We found birds throughout this area nesting and on the backside of this hill and through here, but again, like the open areas. And we think they like the open areas just because this is where they forage. They spend half their time foraging on the ground. Insects are a very important part of their diet. And so this provides an open area for insects. It provides an area to put their cache sites, and then they don't have to travel too far to their nest sites. So that just kind of gives you an idea of what the landscape looks for pinyon jays. Like I said, we're just starting on this research and we have a lot to learn. I'm just in the data collection stage. And there are some other things that we picked up on that may be concerning for pinyon jays into the future that we may need to investigate. One is climate change. On the west side of the state into Utah, we're seeing a lot of die-off of pinyon juniper woodlands. and that could affect mass crops. It could impact insect availability. It could impact nesting colonies if it's, if with high site fidelity, killing all their colony area for nesting. And some of these sites in Utah and the western side of the state, we're seeing jays in those areas, but we're finding very few nests and a lot of jays that are forgoing nesting, and it could be because of the climate conditions. We heard yesterday from Dr. Coate about ravens and predators on Gunnison sage grouse, and I have to say that it's an impact for jays as well. We had a lot of colonies that abutted agricultural lands, urban landscapes, and we did find a lot of raven predation on our pinyon jays, and that accounted for most of our loss of fledglings, or a loss of nestlings before they could fledge. This is that infamous power line that he said it can be problematic with ravens, and that's a baby pinyon jay that he's gotten from the nest, or she's gotten from a nest. They actively hunt these colonies. They'll come in and just fly at the tree and trying to get a response of the pinyon jay. Also, pinyon jays are very vocal, kind of almost obvious where they have their nest. Sometimes I can figure it out, so a raven for sure can figure it out. And so they take a pretty good toll on pinyon jays. And the only work that's looked at nest success for pinyon jays was done in Flagstaff, Arizona, from 1970 to 1985. They found raven predation from 1970 to 1979, but it drastically increased from 80 to 85 as Flagstaff, where the study was near, started to grow and expand, and they saw ravens taking a much higher toll. So I do think when these populations are around urban agricultural places that ravens like, it's problematic for jays as well. So we'd love to learn about how to deal with ravens. But one thing I have to say that kind of made me nervous was covering water sources. Water is very important to pinyon jays. They need their water. So we need to think about that one. So just some of the recommendations from our survey efforts. Yes, high site fidelity at these colonies. So it's something we can recognize, it's something we can map, and something maybe we can protect into the future when we're thinking about treatments and treatment areas. They do breed in Colorado a little bit earlier than they do across other parts of the range in New Mexico and Great Basin. We're finding them starting to breed early February, mid-February, and they usually finish breeding and fledging young by the end of May. So that timing is important to avoid treatments. It's also, if you want to locate colonies, the time to do your survey efforts. CPW has developed a protocol that you can use, and we're happy to share with you. More people out there looking for them, the more we can protect, the more we can start to assess and find out what these birds really need in the landscape. Colonies are fluid, so you might need to assess them over several years or spend a lot of time mapping the nests that are out there. Since we do have a classification, just understand it will take a big effort, but it's worth it. If you can get out there and watch jays, it's totally worth it. And we are working to form a working group. We'd like to get anybody who's interested involved so that we can start sharing information across the state and kind of work towards conservation and management of this species. And if you see trees like that, don't cut it down, because that's really important for jays. And this is something we don't understand when the trees mass, where they're gonna mass, how the jays find them. But super important to recognize that. Keep older trees on the landscapes, those greater than 6-inch DBH, to get the high productivity. And I had a lot of people help collect data for this project and helped with some and then the analysis in the GIS. And I thank everybody and funding from the BLM. And I don't know if we have time for questions.
Is there time? 1 minute.
Yes, it's got to be a short one.
Great job, and really interesting. The last part about the working group really made me wonder, should they be combined with the sage grouse working group or separate, given the limits that we all have to participate in too many things and some of the synergies, as well as the need to avoid certain things.
Oh, you're Kathy? I don't know. I mean, I hesitate. I don't want too big a working group because you can't get anything done, and we're just kind of peeling a little bit back at the Pinyon Jay and starting to understand where we need to go. And there is a range-wide Pinyon Jay working group that already has, I don't know, 60 people or something, and it's already overwhelming. So we have some people, representation from BLM and U.S. Forest Service. We haven't actually gone to the private landowners or the NGOs yet. Am I doing that? So I don't know. Let us, baby steps, we'll say.